Welcome to Left Ungagged, the Don Butler of political podcasts. Oh, Keir Starmer and his advisors will be worried about that Don Butler's becoming a hero. But that's what she is, at least for today, the way she called out Boris Johnson. It's been long overdue, and if the leader of the opposition isn't going to do it, somebody else had to step up. We've actually just finished the podcast. Really enjoyed it. Again, it's one of our better ones. We're trying to keep it a bit tighter, around about the hour mark. Let us know if you like that or not. Personally, I quite like a longer podcast. I would be happy if we just rambled on until we exhausted every topic. But Deborah and Brian kind of think we should go for a more tighter 60-minute, more bang for your buck sort of podcast. So let us know what you prefer. We also spoke about Ruth Davidson becoming Baroness Davidson of Loudon Links. We also talk about Tommy Robinson getting taken to the cleaners at the courts by a young Syrian refugee. Also, we talk about the extreme reaction to what I thought was quite a mild tweet from Douglas Chapman, the SNP MP, when he pointed out that Scotland and England have different rules in terms of COVID, and to bear that in mind if you were coming up from England and holiday to Scotland, that Scotland's not England and different rules apply. That was quite a extreme reaction in some quarters of Twitter to that, mostly from Unionists and Tories. And of course, we've always got more Tory corruption to discuss. We're now 12 episodes into this podcast. Every week we've had a story about Tory corruption, and I don't think there's been a single week where it's been that hard to find one. In fact, some weeks there was 2 and 3 stories and I had to make a decision on what one to go with, which is a pity, a shame, considering that's the country we're currently living in. And I think that's it. I think that's kind of what we covered. Yeah, let us know what you think, and let's get ungagged.
And it was nice to hear you smile. Dream a dream 'cause you'll never die. The stars will never overtake the sky. Life has its turns and it takes a while. And it was nice to hear you smile.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It's another episode of Holyrude Ungagged. We're all a bit hectic. We've had a few changes in scheduling, and then I turned up half an hour late for the scheduling tonight. So hopefully they'll forgive me and I won't, get this done, and it'll be entertaining and fun. So I'm your host, David McClement, transmitting from the Blantyre Free State, and joining me is, at the moment, he's of Dundee, but the Prince of Pizza Hut is returning to Falkirk. There's rumours about an abdication, whether he's going to become the King of Falkirk, we don't know. There's a lot of whispers going on. Stay tuned to hear. So that's Brian Finlay. I actually forgot to say his name at the end of it.
You should know.
Welcome, Brian. And also we'll get Deborah. She's our editing genius, the one responsible for all the fantastic artwork you see in our podcasts every week. Thanks for joining us again, Deborah.
Hello.
Well, we just get right into it. So first up, we have, I wouldn't say she's one of the most favourite people in this podcast, the now Baroness Davidson of Loudon Links. I'd never heard of Loudon Links. I don't know about yours, but...
Loudon Links.
Loudon Links, is it? Right.
Yes.
I thought it was London, like Lundin.
Well, there we are. Who knows?
Deborah,
I think it's
Loudon Links. Deborah, you're from Mulgai. You should know that how something's written is not how it always sounds.
Sorry, I'm very sorry. Yes, it's in Fife, and it's a village that was built in the 19th century.
Yeah, it's a really nice place.
I think it's near Largo, and I was there once when I was a wee boy.
Lower Largo, yep.
Yeah, Lower Largo. So the thing I read said it was like quite a small place on the outskirts of Lower Largo. Mm-hmm. I couldn't imagine a smaller place than Largo, to be honest. What I remember, it was like, yes. It was lovely, but there wasn't much to it.
There's some standing stones there as well.
You're into that kind of thing.
I know.
If you're into
if you're into rocks.
You've got Shell Bay as well nearby, Caravan Park.
I like how this is meant to be about Ruth Davidson, and I'm talking about prehistoric archaeology.
It's become the Loudon Links tourist board here. So obviously Ruth Davidson, former Scottish Tory leader, darling of the Tories at some points in the last decade, has now been elevated to join the House of Lords. So, Brian, what was your thoughts on it?
Yeah, my thoughts in general on Ruth Davidson in the House of Lords and Scottish Tory leaders is never massively positive. But I think that this one was quite interesting to see because it just kind of appeared on social media. I think it was, again, but I don't know if it was scheduled or people were expecting it, but just sort of the first I seen was the Scottish Greens tweeting about it, actually. And it just sort of cemented quite a lot of things about the Scottish Conservatives and the fact that Ruth Davidson is kind of, for family reasons, personal reasons, decided to step back. I'm sure it had nothing to do with Boris Johnson becoming leader of the Conservative Party, and decided to step down as the leader. And, after holding Edinburgh Central in after gaining Edinburgh Central in 2016 with a very small majority, chose not to contest the seat, retired and stepping back as, from an elected politician. And then, of course, on the run up to that election, it was announced that Ruth Davidson would be joining the unelected House of Lords, where, as Nicola Sturgeon has pointed out several times, will never be held to account by the Scottish or indeed the UK electorate. And I just think it's not surprising. I just think it's such a horrible representation of democracy in the UK in general. But I'm sure that's a wider debate. But Ruth Davidson herself being there, am I surprised? No. Do I think it's going to make a massive difference in the constitutional debate? Potentially, because now she can serve in the UK government cabinet. So I'm sure that'll come at some point, something to do with the constitution. So yeah, lots to look forward to, I'm sure.
Did you see her swan in? Wear ermine coat on and, no mask. Oh, just her face that looks like a false mask. I don't know. I've got no time for it.
That was brutal.
Was that
That's
really
harsh.
shady?
Just
the tea, babe. Just the tea. I've got no time for it. Have you? Has anybody actually got time for the whole systemic institution of, being an unelected representative? What does that even mean? How can... I haven't fully formed this thought in my brain, but just going for the sort of cabaret show that is, Westminster, that whole process of her getting, walking in and standing up there and swearing on her undying allegiance to the Queen and all that, just kind of makes you sick and makes you think it's all a farce. It's all just a big show. It's a crap show.
It gives you the dry bulk, as my nana would say.
That's it, exactly.
I mean, I don't know whether to say she's a smooth operator or she just, is hell of a lucky. Gone way back, she got into the Scottish Parliament because she was top of the Glasgow list, but she only got that because the guy who had finished above her had to drop out because of a financial scandal. So she was very fortuitous just to get into the Scottish Parliament when she did. And then a leadership thing came up. She entered that. Again, she wasn't the front runner. It was
Murdo Fraser was
the front runner, and then he sort of destroyed his own campaign with his idea of completely separating for the UK Tories, which I don't necessarily think would have been a bad idea, but it certainly wasn't popular with the Scottish Tory membership. So that cost him the leadership there. So she became leader, kind of against the odds. And again, when people have been, I think the Tories just happened to get an upturn in support, not because she became leader, but because there was a kind of polarisation towards independence on one side and unionism on the other side. Because although, she was popular with the media, and then I'm sure we can get into how easy a ride the media have given her over the years, and she was quite good in debates, but then so was Annabel Goldie, and that none of her efforts ever translated into better election results. And then as the tide turned again, I think she saw the writing on the wall, and that's when she got out, like Brian mentioned. She made sure she didn't contest the constituency seat because she knew she would lose it. And I think she realises now that, this was definitely the high point for the Scottish Tories. And, she managed to get out before it goes wrong and she gets the blame. And I think she probably was looking for some kind of cushy media job. And then, out of nowhere, this offers came from Boris, who she's never been supposedly in very good terms with, to get this cushy number sitting in the House of Lords, picking up a cheque and not really being accountable to anybody.
Exactly.
When she fell into the Clyde, she came out with a fish in her pocket.
She was
Absolutely.
a real media darling, wasn't she? Like the media really loved her. She had a bit the Willie Rennie about her there with her stunts she would do. Like she'd climb up on top of a tank, or, you know, she'd do a little vox pop for a newscast, no problem. She really annoys me.
I mean, I've always found her entirely unlikable. I've never understood this appeal that the media talk about. I just think she always comes across as very smug and just not somebody I would ever want to spend much time around. I mean, you say the media liked her. I think a lot of that is because she worked in the media right up until she only became a member of the Tories right before she ran as an MSP. And I think she probably still had a lot of, connections and, good relationships with people in the media, which is why at every turn they've always been hesitant to really kind of go in hard or hold her to account or let her away with sort of things that other politicians would have been crucified for.
And we can certainly talk about Ruth Davidson being a media darling and being smooth operator, really good in debates, but when actually cornered with something that was really, really quite challenging, it completely buckled or hid quite a lot of the time. My favourite one, actually, and it always makes me laugh, is when the UK government, so 2017 election, and they obviously went to the supply agreement with the DUP, and of course really controversial because of how homophobic the DUP are. Such, that's an opinion in case anyone thinks otherwise. And basically she was challenged about their view on same-sex marriage and LGBT rights in general, and basically she just walked away from the person. Like it was at Edinburgh Castle and she was just the guy had the mic and she just kind of looked at him, just shook her head and just walked away. And then same with the 2-child cap, rape clause and things like that. She was nowhere to be seen for at least a week. And then it was sort of party spokesperson says this, here's a press release. So actually we can say, oh yeah, okay, great, media darling. But actually when it came to the crunch, completely,
false.
Not great.
That's
false
what I meant.
And superficial, yeah.
That's what I meant by a false face, by the way. I wasn't commenting on her looks. I'm not that superficial. I just really hate her politics. I do think, though, in the grand scheme of things, if you look at all the Tories in Scotland, she is probably the most likeable of, that's so hard to say.
That's like saying it's the nicest man in prison,
Yeah, you can imagine thinking, oh, Liz Smith, she looks like a right hoot. Do you know what I mean? Or Murdo Fraser, I'm sure he's great company. I really don't think so.
No, if I went to a dinner party and Ruth Davidson was there and she was in her full ermine and all that, I wouldn't be that mad. I think it'd be an interesting dinner party.
I'd need to stay off the wine.
Have to drink a lot of whiskey to get through it.
No, I would end up saying something that I shouldn't.
Yeah, that would be a tough dinner party for me.
Sorry, that was a wee bit of a controversial opinion there.
Well, I think you're right in the sense that when you look at the kind of Scottish Tories, most of them all have a sort of similar profile. Like she does not fit into the traditional Scottish Tory mould, and she can relate a bit beyond the usual demographic. Like the Scottish Tories have always been a bit different for the UK Tories. The UK Tories, you've got multiple. You think you're a UK Tory, there's multiple different things that come to mind, like whether it's like greedy yuppies or just out and out bigots. The Scottish Tories have, you can always imagine they're like a wee middle-aged man, quite kind of Presbyterian in his outlook, a bit joyless, they all fall into that sort of category for me when I think of them. Whereas Ruth Davidson, at least she doesn't fit into that. So I can see why they probably picked her as leader, because she could break out of the traditional Scottish Tory box.
I think
was that praise?
That was praise. But I think going back to what you were saying at the start, though, that the Scottish Tories were on the way up because of the polarisation in Scotland, and I think nobody can out-unionise the Tories.
Yeah.
And I think that this is where I don't think it's maybe got so much to do with Ruth Davidson as such. I think it was more to do with the message of say no to her, which was really quite misogynistic in general. It was always say no to Nicola Sturgeon, no to Indirect 2, no to her, all these types of things. And I think they just kind of positioned themselves as like the sort of anti-Indirect 2 vote. and always lost, but somehow thought they won. And I don't really know how much of that actually translated has been Ruth Davidson. And I don't know that what the Tories tend to do is if somebody does really well, like really go for it and be like, yeah, like this is who we need to, I can see Ruth Davidson ended up in cabinet and being, perhaps being a front runner of any Ref 2 campaign for the union. And I think it's going to massively backfire. I don't think that Ruth Davidson has got the likability that necessarily that the Scottish Tories maybe think she does. Of course, she's got appeal because she the Tories perhaps got the best vote that they ever have, but it still wasn't that high. And she's still a Tory, and she's now Baroness, and she's now sits in the House of Lords. So honestly, for me, I'm like, bring it on, because I'd love to see Baroness Davidson stand opposite Nicola Sturgeon, who's got extremely high popularity ratings, and go at it, because I really don't think it's going to end well for the union campaign based on that decision.
I'd love to see her in a debate in her ermine coat, because she would be extra sweating.
I can just imagine Nicola Sturgeon referring to her as Baroness every question.
Time.
Be brilliant.
I could see the Tories down south thinking that she'd be a good one to front for a potential future no campaign. I don't know if she would take it though. I think she's looking for a semi-quiet retirement. I think she'll like popping up in the media here and there to throw bricks at the SNP just to keep her profile good. But I'm not sure she wants another sort of high pressure job like that. But maybe I'm wrong. It'd be good though. It'd be good if they picked a Tory.
Sorry, I kept interrupting there and you didn't finish your sentence.
I was just going to say, I think it would be good if they picked a Tory. I think it was the right thing for the No campaign in 2014 to pick somebody like Alistair Darling. I'm not sure who the equivalent in 2021 or 2022 would be right enough, because the level that the Labour Party's held in Scotland has plummeted so much since then. But it probably still would be the right thing, because at least they're not a Tory. Maybe Willie Rennie.
Yay!
Willie Rennie
I heart Willie Rennie.
Yeah, I just think, Ruth Davidson has, I don't think it's really harsh to say that she's completely sold out to democracy in general by choosing to be an unelected legislator in the second chamber at Westminster, but also to be a member of the LGBTQ plus community and be part of a party which at the moment, particularly when it comes to the trans question and the debates around self-ID, is reprehensible, but also particularly that she was the leader of the Scottish Tories whilst their UK party was in an agreement with Arlene Foster. And if you're happy to square that for your own personal success and your own personal standing, I don't know how you sleep at night, to be honest.
Well, we've had some suggestions about the podcast that we need more conflict, that we're too agreeable with each other. So I'm just going to disagree right now, Brian. I don't think she sold out at all, because I don't think you can sell out if you never really had that many principles to begin with.
That's shade.
I just think she's got the cushiest of jobs. She's sorted, isn't she? That's it. She's got the golden pension. She's got, £300 a day whenever she wants to tap in. I've what very little respect I had for her. I've just got no time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Nah. Anyway, look forward to your media appearances in the future, Baroness Davidson.
Yes, Baroness. Tugs one for Locke, you can't see.
Well, I'll be quite happy if this is a quiet retirement and we never have to talk about Ruth Davidson ever again. But I've got a feeling she might pop up. Okay, let's move on to the next segment. So the question is it Anglophobic to say that Scotland is not England? A lot of people in the unionist side get very, very angry the other day because an SNP MP, Douglas Chapman, shared a graphic on Twitter, had a caption saying, "Thank you for your cooperation, love you," and it had a picture of the Scottish Saltire and the Scottish Government logo on it, and it was reminding people that Scotland's coronavirus rules in relation to face coverings, and basically just pointing out to anybody coming up from England over the summer, maybe on their holidays, that Scotland's not England and we have different rules. I was quite baffled by the the extreme hostility and outrage that was provoked with this. Deborah, thoughts?
Breaking news, Portugal isn't Spain and Belgium isn't France. It's so absurd. The reaction was just a bit over the top, wasn't it? They were so, this is racist. This is terrible racism. The vile nationalists. It was ridiculous, really.
Right.
Scotland is not England. England is not Scotland. The end. It's just like, I think it's just wild that the reaction that came from that. Was it Blair McDougall?
Yep.
Of the former New
Better
Labour
Together.
Better Together campaign was just going nuts about it, wasn't he? He was raging. Yeah, I just don't even know where to kind of start to try and understand why he would be so upset by that. I don't get it. Is it because we should just? But this goes right back to way back to early in the COVID-19. Like, see, the first time things were starting to really relax far too early, far too quickly, back in last summer in 2020, when there was a big uproar because Scotland and Wales wanted to have different rules from England. Using the word deviation, can't really deviate from another country anyway. And then everyone's like, yeah, but we need to have a four nations approach to this. We need to be in lockstep. Everyone needs to people are going to be so confused. Well, no, what we can do is we can say that they're different countries and that might have different rules. Oh no, you can't do that either. So now we're just creating problem upon problem. So basically the problem is that certain people, particularly people who believe in the union and believe that the United Kingdom should stay together, get a little bit touchy around certain subjects like this. And I don't know if they will ever be happy, ever.
In life.
So there we go. In life, and before you know it, they'll end up that wee unhappy man that votes Tory.
The Scottish Conservative Chief Whip claimed that the messaging was aggressive.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
We love you, is that what he said?
He said, thank you for your cooperation. Love you. I'm not sure how would you phrase that to be not aggressive then? Because genuinely, like, he must just think everything's aggressive. Like, imagine buying a ticket in the bus. Like, the guy says, thank you. Don't be so aggressive. Like, maybe some of them are just completely so caught up in their sort of unionism that they just, any mention of Scotland actually being a country just seems to drive them insane. And it's like, well, we've got to say, like, they're unionists, so does that not imply you think Scotland's a country because you want it to be in a union?
It's too rational, David.
Do you just want Scotland not to be basically be the same as Yorkshire? Is that what they really think? Is it just they want it to be a region of England, really?
Or maybe we've got it the wrong way around. Maybe they just want England to be Scotland, more like Scotland, because Scotland's awesome. No, I saw some of the unionist commentators, some famous ones. I wouldn't name drop them because that will give them a big head. But some of them were saying stuff like, imagine they changed that to say Scotland isn't Pakistan. And someone said, Scotland isn't Pakistan. That made them even more raging. It was just
breaking news.
Breaking news. I know it really is. It's like with Gaelic road signs, an irrational hatred of Gaelic road signs.
An ambulance.
Yeah,
that was one
ambulance.
recently.
Please,
Polis,
I saw that one.
we call it the polis anyway. It's not even that hard. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It really was the reaction, and it's still going on. I keep seeing bits in my Twitter, and I keep laughing.
Yeah, the Gaelic road signs thing. I saw a thing about that recently, and somebody was saying, they're wasting millions. Well, millions, come on, for a start. But somebody pointed out saying, well, they're only putting the Gaelic on when the road signs are getting replaced anyway, so it's actually costing absolutely nothing. It's not like they've decided they're going to have a campaign to go around replacing every road sign in Scotland in the next, 6 months. But yeah, it's just again, though, it's that element of they just don't want to acknowledge that Scotland's a country or got any kind of cultural difference from England or Britain, which they just kind of seem to consider the same thing.
But it's always interesting when you think about that concept, because if you look at, like, culturally or how we are, as a nation, there's a lot of similarities because there's a lot of centralisation of government in the UK. But see, when you hear, like, these sort of things, it's like, oh yeah, that's really very British. I was like, well, no, actually what you mean is that's very South East English. Is that what you mean? It's not even Northern England, or it's not even Wales, or it's not anywhere. It's not very British. It's just something that might happen in the wealthy parts of the southeast of England. Is that what you mean?
It's a pro pars toto. I might have got that wrong. I'm not very good at Latin, but it just means a part taken for the whole. And when people really mean England or southeast England, they'll sometimes just say the UK. Or if they just mean, if they mean Scotland, they'll call it England. It's very much a sort of imagined culture, in my opinion, because when they talk about Britpop music, they're not really talking about any Scottish bands included in that, are they?
No.
Can you think of a Scottish Britpop band?
Travis. Would that
they
come under Britpop?
Does it? Is that Britpop?
Maybe, I don't know.
I thought it was more like Oasis and.
Well, Travis was a wee bit after that, but I don't know. I think that's debatable.
Aye, there's a debate for you.
Tweet us and let us know. Do you consider Travis part of Britpop?
I disagree that Travis is part of Britpop. All right, so that's us disagreeing again. Another thing too is culturally too, when you talk about Scotland and stuff too, what a lot of people will actually mean is a certain part of Scotland. So cultural identity is imagined and replicated and developed and repackaged for tourism. So, everybody just needs to calm down. Scotland is not England. England is not Scotland. We have different laws for different areas, but we also have some of the same laws because we're consistent, because we're next to each other and we're in a union. It's the same thing that happens in the EU. France isn't Germany. Germany is not France. France has different laws from Germany, but they have some similar laws because they're in the EU. It's not difficult. And see when you talk about the comparison of the United Kingdom to the EU, a lot of unionists really don't like that. a lot. But then of course they're like, yeah, but the EU is not like the UK. And I was like, no, you're right. It's a lot more centralised in the southeast of England. We can talk about there's problems with the EU. I don't think the EU is perfect by any means. There's a lot of problems with it. But it's like, yeah, you're right. The EU is different from Westminster because they don't have a sovereign parliament that overrules the other ones.
And culturally, there is things that you can call British. I think when you're talking about sense of humour, I think there's definitely a British sense of humour in comparison to an American sense of humour. And then you can break it up again. There's some things that you would say, well, that is definitely more Scottish humour, and that's maybe a bit more English humour. But in terms of the COVID restrictions, there's absolutely no doubt that they're different because Scotland and England are different in terms of the rules in COVID. That's just a fact. It's not debatable. I just don't get the rage. It's just.
I think it's just really, really touchy. Just really, really touchy about certain things. One of them being anything that seems to solidify the fact that Scotland is actually a separate country, and a lot of people get really, really touchy about that one. Now we're one United Kingdom, but we are at the moment. But if you see the way that's going,
is it technically no United Kingdoms? Because she's Queen of Scotland and England, and I don't know. That's a whole different debate, isn't it? The
United Kingdom.
Honestly, there's so many different layers to this.
We've got down to semantics. That's what's happening.
Yeah, there's a lot of because there's different parliamentary laws and names for different parts, and it gets quite complicated.
Okay, next up is our usual segment. It is everybody's favourite segment, More Tory Corruption. Cue the jingle.
More Tory corruption. More Tory corruption. More Tory corruption.
A former Tory councillor was given a £120 million government contract for personal protective equipment, and it is now lying unused because of concerns about its quality. Steve Deccan, who owns medical device manufacturer Platform 14, had his offer to supply PPE from China fast-tracked through the government's controversial VIP lane. The Sunday Times reported that fewer than 1 out of every 400 of the face shields that the company procured has been used because the regulator does not believe that they meet the right standards. The original order of 120 million shields has delivered just 274,000 to the NHS, and that represents 0.23% of the overall stock. And I think it works out about £400 per visor. But it's not all bad news. Mr. Deccan has just bought a £1.5 million mansion. So at least somebody's doing all right. It's the latest instalment of More Tory Corruption.
More Tory corruption. More Tory corruption.
Okay, next up, we had to talk about Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson has just lost his libel case that was brought against him by Syrian refugee teenager Jamal Hijazi. People might remember this case a couple of years ago. It was a horrible video that went viral of a young boy getting bullied and attacked and beat up. And you would think that everybody's sympathies would be with somebody who was just minding his own business and get assaulted. But because he's a Syrian refugee, Tommy Robinson came out and completely without any basis declared that the video didn't represent the truth, because he claimed that Mr. Hijazi was a violent thug who had attacked women and girls in the school and had pulled a knife on somebody. And all through this case, there's been zero evidence of any of that. Apparently, all these violent incidents that Tommy Robinson claimed happened were not recorded in any paperwork in the boys' school, despite them claiming that a lot of them happened in school. And in fact, the school record showed that he was a quiet boy and wasn't involved in any trouble, and his behaviour was very good. So Tommy Robinson now owes the young man $100,000 and is now on the hook for £500,000 worth of costs for court. That's a shame for Tommy Robinson, isn't it? I'm sure he's all be heartbroken.
Let me get my tiny violin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think this is a really positive story, because obviously tends to be more hardship that we tend to read about or see in the media, but this was really quite an uplifting one, because Tommy Robinson himself, this is Tommy Robinson that says people shouldn't come to this country if they can't respect our laws, but has actually been in prison for assaulting somebody and also trying to use a fake passport. Well, not a fake passport, someone else's passport, when he was coming back from the US. So that in itself is quite interesting. The fact that Tommy Robinson has lied to, sow division against refugees, again, not surprising. That there has been accusations of this in the past that Tommy Robinson has done, and I'm pretty sure that we can vouch that would not surprise any of us if that happens to be true. But the fact that this young chap was being bullied at school, being attacked, clearly quite a vulnerable chap, and coming all the way from here from Syria, and then you've just got some absolute moron just making up lies to make it even worse. Is just to stoke division and stoke more hatred is just, it's just not right, and it's not acceptable. I mean, and if you think Tommy Robinson is happy to lie about a 15-year-old boy to further his own case, then I think that just needs to tell you everything that you need to know about Tommy Robinson and all his hangers on.
I got the vibe that most of his information came from him doing a Facebook live chat. That's the vibe I got off it. Do you remember there was a guy, Alex Cairns or something, that was going about Glasgow South Side, and he was always doing these Facebook live chats, and it would be like the digger online. Everybody would just be saying a load of absolute nonsense, saying, oh, this guy's doing that up the close, and go in the back here, you'll see that lassie. And it was to me, this absolute bullshit that Tommy Robinson was coming away with, just total unfounded allegations that really impacted Jamal and his family's life. That, as you say, a vulnerable person in a vulnerable community, and Tommy Robinson, he should have been fined a lot more. He should have went back to jail.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine you're a teenager just going about your life, and then a war erupts around you. So that's terrifying. You have to flee your home, travelling, end up in a country that you're not familiar with. So that's disorientating. Trying to settle into a new life and a new culture and new surroundings. You get attacked at school with some bully, beats you up. That's pretty bad in itself. But then it goes online, so thousands of people around the world see you getting beat up. If that's not bad enough, then you've got this absolute idiot that just decides to sort of try to make it all your fault. And and I didn't mention before, but as a result of these claims, the young guy was getting death threats. His family had to take him out of school. I think they may have had to move out the area. When you think of that, $100,000 doesn't seem very much.
Exactly.
I'm glad to see Tommy Robinson in the hole for $600,000, although he's declared bankruptcy. So how much of that will even ever be paid is another thing. But it seems like there should have been more consequences for Tommy Robinson than this. Like, is it no inciting racial hatred? Would I thought
Yeah.
so. Instead of the young guy having to take a libel case himself against Tommy Robinson, where was the authorities like to take criminal charges? I
Yeah.
don't even remember them getting discussed at the time.
No, and I think as well that ultimately what Tommy Robinson was doing, and you set the picture it really clearly, but the different layers to Jamal's experiences and how it came to be that this happened. But ultimately for Tommy Robinson just to victim blame and actually pile more pressure and more trauma onto this chap is just awful.
And it was malicious. That's the
really
thing.
malicious, yeah.
It was malicious.
And it was just to put across this false narrative that these people are dangerous, these people shouldn't be coming here because they're going to be problematic, they're going to be threatening women, using knives, doing X, Y, and Z. I mean, come on.
And he knew fine well what the outcome of that would be.
Of course he did.
The kind of people that follow Tommy Robinson and take their lead, it could be no surprise to him that there was death threats and all that resulted out of these claims.
Absolutely.
Sad.
It's terrible. And actually, when we decided to do this particular article, there was something that stuck in my head, and I was like, I'm sure there's another story about Tommy Robinson that I want to bring up on this podcast today. But it turned out that it wasn't. It was Paul Golden. Remember Paul Golden of the Britain First phenomenon? Well, that just shows how my brain works. I just thought it was the same person, but no, it's Paul Golden. The best thing about Paul Golden was when he'd just come back from a trip in Russia, right? And he gets to Heathrow Airport, gets detained by the police, right? And they want to have a look through his phone and his laptop and stuff like that. And he refuses to give them the passwords so they can come in and have a look at these things, right? And then he gets basically put under the terrorism laws, which I thought was quite an ironic outcome for that particular story of somebody who is so against people coming over here, apparently, who will automatically be a risk of terrorism. And they himself faced prosecution under Terrorism Act, which is not an act I particularly agree with, because you shouldn't have to give over your information to the police so they can look at your phones. But at the same time, I thought it was pretty ironic. If you don't like her laws, don't come here. And in other words, if you don't like her laws, don't come back.
I mean, Tommy Robinson, he's a horrible character. I mean, I think it's mostly about the money for him.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to remember, it was a good number of years that he first burst in the scene as the leader of the EDL.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't hear it spoke very much about, does anybody remember when he left the EDL? And for a very short time, he set himself up as an anti-extremist sort of, and his narrative at that point was it was a sort of, I've left the far right and this is why the far right is terrible. And that was because he had I think he thought he was going to get funding from sort of some anti-racism sectors to become a kind of reformed racist. And then I think when that didn't turn up, he just went back to his old shtick, so the guy probably doesn't even believe in his own racism.
His application got rejected. I think you dreamt that. I don't think, was that a thing?
I'm sure it was. He left the EDL and tried to set himself up as an anti-extremist. There was still a wee bit of bigotry in there because he was trying to equate, he was an anti-extremism in terms that he opposed radical Islam, but he opposed, far-right sort of radicalism as well. But like I said, it didn't last very long.
Oh.
And I'm fascinated by the way it's never really mentioned, actually.
So his severe swing was to centrist then.
Pretty much,
I don't believe in anything radical. Yeah, it's interesting. That's quite a journey.
Chasing the cash. Anything else we want to say about Tommy Robinson, aka Stephen Yaxley Lennon?
That's his name, isn't it? I can know it's always a mouthful. Can never quite get my mouth around that one.
I have just one thing to say. Haha. I'm time watching. It's just, what can you say about him? Haha.
But I think there could be quite a lot to be said on Don Butler and Keir Starmer. I think there's a lot coming.
Okay, so last Thursday, Labour MP Don Butler got ejected from the House of Commons because she refused to withdraw her accusation that Boris Johnson is a liar. This was after she had stated several instances of the Prime Minister lying to Parliament. This has been sort of bubbling away in the background on social media, where there's a video of these claims going about that's got like 24 million views, and yet Dawn Butler gets thrown out of Parliament because she points out that Parliament is being lied to. It's just an example of how decrepit and backwards that Westminster Parliament is.
Butler. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, during the last 18 months, it has been a tale of the good, the bad and the ugly. The good in that the people of Brent and elsewhere have joined together to form mutual aid groups, religions have come together and found common ground, and strangers are now firm friends. The bad in this government's catastrophic handling of the pandemic, the mixed messages, corruption in plain sight, and the authoritarian laws and erosion of our democracy, and the ugly. Racism has reared its ugly head in society, spurred on by government reports and the hyping up of the culture war and the war on woke. And whilst the NHS was coping with 130,000 people dying from the pandemic, the Prime Minister was making his mates rich. Cronyism is rife, old chums are given jobs regardless of their skill set and some a little bit on the side. This has been one big experiment for this corrupt, authoritarian, racist enabling government, and I'm not scared, Madam Deputy Speaker, of saying it like it is. The government said we need to talk about class, so let's do it. Let's call it out, this toxic elitism once and for all. Highlight Byline Times, Good Law Project, Novara Media, Open Democracy, Amnesty, Liberty, all exposing the government, and the government's response is to spend public money defending the indispensable. Funny how there's no money for the NHS staff, but £1 billion of COVID contracts have been awarded to Conservative donors. Ministers were not involved, we were told, but then Good Law Project exposed emails from the Prime Minister's advisers and the Home Secretary lobbying for money. This corrupt, authoritarian approach of the government would be condemned and investigated if it was happening anywhere else in the world. The 1% believe they owe nothing to society. They don't believe in the NHS because they don't support it. But this week I spoke to oral youth writer Manuel Nadim. She wrote, "Let anti-racism be both common logic and law. May we have more accountability than apologies. May performative placeholders posts be followed by policy. When the future arrives, let the minimum wage be the living wage. Let survival be birthright. And when the poor cannot pay with anything else, let us not ask them to pay with their lives." Madam Deputy Speaker, poor people in our country have paid with their lives because the Prime Minister spent the last 18 months misleading this House and the country. Peter Stefanik from the CWU has over 27 million views on his online, and let me tell you some of them. He highlights that the Prime Minister said the economy has grown by 73%. It's just not true. Reinstated nurses bursary, just not true. There wasn't an app working anywhere in the world, just isn't true. Tories invested 34 billion in the NHS, not true. The Prime Minister said we have severed the link between infection and serious disease and death. Not only is this not true, Madam Deputy Speaker, but it is dangerous, and it's dangerous to lie in the pandemic. And I'm disappointed that the Prime Minister has not come to the House to correct the record and to correct the fact that he has lied to this House and the country over and over again.
Order. I'm sure that the member will reflect on her words just then, perhaps correct the record.
Madam Deputy Speaker, what would you rather, a weakened leg or a severed leg? You know, at the end of the day, the Prime Minister has lied to this House time and time again. And it's funny that we get in trouble in this place for calling out the lie rather than the person lying.
Order, order, order. Order. Can you please reflect on your words and withdraw your remarks?
Deputy Speaker, I've reflected on my words, and somebody needs to tell the truth in this House that the Prime Minister has lied.
Under the power given me by Standing Order number 43, I order the member to withdraw immediately from the House for the remainder of the...
Deborah, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous. She basically just told the truth. There was nothing really inflammatory about what she said. She just says Boris Johnson has lied to this chamber and he's a liar. And it, as you say, it's this decrepit, archaic, stupid traditional rule of, oh, you can't call other members a liar even when they're pure lying. It's just the Speaker of the House as well. Where's his backbone? Where's his, saying, well, maybe in these circumstances it is, we might have to call into question, the appropriateness of this inept government. But is that no the speaker? Is the speaker no meant to be, impartial to things? Whereas it always feels like they're just sticking up for the government. And I understand protocol and procedure and all that shite, but he's a liar. Boris Johnson is a liar. Just in case anybody's no sure about this, he's a liar. Don Butler was right. And for Keir Starmer, by the way, not to back her up, that's, immediately.
Yeah, he took, I think it was 3 or 4 days before he came out and backed her. You can only wonder what kind of conversations were going on behind closed doors.
What focus groups were going on.
Yeah, and trying to figure out triangulate what the right thing was doing instead of just being on the side of the person that was telling the truth.
Yeah, and the quote he used is, the Prime Minister was the master of untruth and half-truths. And I think it was you, David, that says, whoever came up with that must be dead proud of themselves, think they sound so clever. And that's it, exactly. He's saying nothing of substance. He has all the substance, a wet bit of toilet paper, and not even a good bit of toilet paper, a one ply. What is the point in being the leader of the opposition when there's so many opportunities for you to score a goal? Your own MPs, Dawn Butler, is standing up. She's given you this opportunity. There's an open goal, passing it to you, and big potato face just, I shouldn't call him potato. Because David went like this, and he looked like a potato.
I think potato face is a great name for Keir Starmer, to be honest.
Yes, he's a big potato and a soggy one. He's just, he has zero backbone, the guy, and he just was like, I agree with what Dawn Butler says, but I also agree with, what the Speaker of the House done, because I'm such a cool guy on the fence.
Well, I think it was the Deputy Speaker who is a Labour MP, so I can see that they wouldn't necessarily want to throw her under the bus. But to me, I bet the first reaction in Keir Starmer's office was fear that Dawn Butler was making a leadership play by actually, attacking the Tories.
Yeah, and this is what's actually surprising. Yeah. Oh my God, Dawn Butler actually went for it. She actually went on the attack, delivered a fantastic speech. That what she was referring to was, Peter Stefanovac's videos that's had like 24, 25 million views, whatever it's been. And she was just listing out all the corruption, all the inaccuracies, the bad handling of the pandemic, and pointing to the fact it's been, communities that have had to create the goodness in themselves to try and coordinate and to get through this pandemic. And the Prime Minister has basically lied to Parliament, lied to the constituents, people right across the UK, and he should be called a liar. Yes. And I think, do you know what, it was fantastic for Dawn Butler to do that, particularly at the end of that speech, and particularly in the face of, Dawn Butler is a woman of colour, and she's faced a lot of racist attacks in the past. For when she was stopped by the police, for loads of different things, similar to Diane Abbott and other women, women MPs, that they faced relentless abuse for loads of different things. Dawn is one of those. And for her to really stand up and just say, you are a liar, and that is speaking real clear truth to power. And then you've got Wet Blanket coming out saying, oh yeah, he's such a master of half truths, and not even, and then, but also saying that the deputy speaker was right to remove her from the House. And I just sort of think, there was a real opportunity there. Jeremy Corbyn, 15, 20 minutes after this video went on social media, said solidarity to Dawn Butler. Yep. I mean, that video of Dawn Butler's has got like 105,000 likes, and it really started to open a conversation about just how much Boris Johnson lies, just how much, he's been sacked in the past for lying, making up quotes. And when he worked in, was it the Times or the Telegraph? I can never remember which Tory paper it was.
One of them.
One of them. So, it was a real opportunity for the leadership, the current leadership of Labour, to really get on board with this discussion and really say, do you know what, you're right, he is a liar. Let's and they could have been trumpeting this as a starting point for them to position themselves to be a future government. Now, the polls, really haven't shifted that much since, the 2019 general election. They're starting to close ever so slightly now, but I think that's to do with the incompetence of this government more so than anything else. But, the opposition actually needs to be an opposition, attack the Tories and really make some ground and get them running. Because if Labour start to lead in the polls and there's, in Scotland, the SNP is trumping way ahead, the Tories will have to watch what they're doing and they'll have to play by the rules, because they've not been playing by the rules all the way through this pandemic. And it's just been, oh yeah, we've broken all these rules and Matt Hancock's been sacked for having an affair, plus 2% in the polls. So it's like, now the polls are starting to narrow. Let's take every single opportunity to get the opposition parties ahead in the polls, and because that in itself has an impact on how policy and how the government conducts itself.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't get the whole Starmer approach of like,
what approach?
Don't throw a punch. It's not just even a case of left and right. I mean, even New Labour, like, I've got a million criticism of Tony Blair and New Labour, but they still attack the Tories because, well, how else are you going to actually win? I mean, I'd like to know what the secret plan that the Starmer Brigade have actually got, because it's baffling at the moment. But yeah, I mean, it goes, but it's not just Boris, it is about the whole just ridiculous nature of Westminster. Like, there is just terms that you're not allowed to use, and some of them I've never heard before because they were clearly insults from like literally 200 years ago. I've never heard of a blackguard. Well, I've heard of a gutter snipe, but it's pretty...
What's a blackguard?
I've no idea, but you're not allowed to say it in Parliament.
Oh.
Can you call somebody a coward or a git? A git must be older than I thought. I thought that's quite a modern thing. Can't call them a hooligan or a rat or a stool pigeon.
Stool pigeon?
Okay. Also, you can't say that somebody's drunk, even if they're absolutely clearly steaming.
What? When were these rules written?
Who knows? Well, they were first written God knows how long ago, but I don't know how many amendments there have been recently, but yeah,
not many, but it sounds it.
That's how, if you hear somebody in Parliament say the member's clearly tired and emotional, that's code for he's steaming. Like, get him out of here. He's drunk. I mean, any other workplace you turn up drunk and somebody would get disciplined, and somebody gets disciplined for actually pointing out that you're steaming. In what workplace would that happen? House of Commons.
One where they've got a discounted bar.
Exactly.
That was exempt for the closing times during the pandemic as well.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's completely wild. And I think, see, when you actually if you think about the House of Commons as a workplace, there's just so much wildness, that was going on. I mean, even just like Jacob Rees-Mogg wanting to bring all the MPs back, last summer, we need to get the country back to work, so we're just going to get all these people crammed into the House of Commons. And then when they increased the numbers, I think 3 or 4 of them tested positive, and then they had to like revert back to having, the kind of blended virtual parliament. But I think that, that we could talk about for hours, because that's about perceptions and people working from home and opening up the workplace, which, Tories don't want to do. Anyway, back to Don Butler. Yeah, I think there is definitely a lining up of Don Butler to potentially go for some kind of leadership role in the future. I'm happy about that. I think because she's done a few videos since this incident's happened, talking about, these rules are archaic, they're old, they're outdated, and it protects the powerful. And I completely agree with her. And I think that even if it's not a successful, I'm going to go for leadership and she becomes leader, which, at the moment, she's my number one choice. Then it's like, well, at least hopefully some of these sort of rules will be readdressed and hopefully made a little bit fairer.
Scottish Labour have been very quiet on the subject, I noticed. They've not really said much.
Yeah, actually, I've not heard a thing for anybody for Scottish Labour. I didn't even realise until you mentioned it there.
I think
Scottish Labour.
I think it potentially has some ramifications for their anti-independence argument, because they're always saying, Labour is a strong opposition to the Tories in Westminster. We need to be part of the union to be able to have a stronger voice. You've got to vote for Scottish Labour to get Labour in power. But as it stands, no, there is. Can you imagine Keir Starmer was your boss and you had just done this, quite a good big gesture, as you said, David, given an opportunity to really get stuck right in there. Like, he hasn't needed any opportunities because the Tories are so inept anyway. Look how many corruption stories we've done. Look at their sleaze, their scandal. Like, there's so many different things he could attack the Tories on, and he hasn't. And here is a successful representative woman in politics, a black woman. She's saying this great thing, and our boss is just floating about like a limp, not penis.
Took
I
3
can't
days.
think of anything else. Limp.
Limp. He's just limp.
He's limp. He's just
Took
limp.
3 days to come out with a cleverly crafted statement
release.
that would sort of not support her, but it was hardly like applauding her. It was like, how much support can I give without exposing myself too much, without committing to anything? And I just no time for him at all.
Bland. He's so bland. He's a potato.
If it had died down, that would have never come out, like that statement. It was just the fact that it was clearly the silence was becoming deafening, so they had to come out and say something.
They had to say something, yeah. And then also, like, Keir Starmer as well has not had a very good couple of days either, as Labour leader. Mm-hmm. There was calls from different trade unions to back strike action for basically changes to the law that would make them exempt for when they're pinged by the app, so that they could just return to work. Keir Starmer said, "Oh, I wouldn't support that collective action." He could have just said he just didn't like unions, and it would be much easier. Keir Starmer said, the 3% pay rise for NHS workers is it's not fair and it's not high enough, but also thinks that the 15% is high. Well, the 15% is what the RCN is saying, what their trade unions are saying, so perhaps you should listen to them and not just pick a number and think, what I think is, in the middle, because centrists love the middle. I think, to be honest, I think we're on a bit of a countdown here for when Keir Starmer will no longer be Labour leader. I can't see Keir Starmer being the leader going into the next general election. If he is, I'll be very surprised. And even if it does go in as the leader of Labour for the next general election, then it's just going to be handing another victory over to the Tories.
If I was to predict the next UK general election, which is still at least a couple of years away, I would predict Keir Starmer will limp on until that election, like doing absolutely terrible. About a year out for the election, the Tories will dump Boris and stick somebody else, and the media will convince us that that's actually a change of government. Yeah, and they will trounce Keir Starmer, who will then stand in after the election, and we'll have God knows who, some other monstrous Tory in charge.
Again, it's deja vu. It's deja vu. That's what they've done with Theresa May and Boris Johnson. Who's next, though? Who would be the next Tory? Oof, it's even scary to think about.
It'll be somebody worse. It's always worse. I mean, look at Theresa May standing up, like, was it last week or whatever, about, criticising the government for cutting the foreign aid. And you're like, oh my God, we used to think she was the worst, and actually she's got something redeemable about her, and we're stuck with this fucking blonde blancmange.
I think we're all hungry. We keep referring to politicians as types of food.
But
well, I'm quite hungry. My wife made dinner tonight, and she was really pleased with. She made homemade peri peri chips, and I was quite looking forward to it. And it turns out she get mixed up, and she thought it was peri peri seasoning, and it was peri peri salt. So she put 2 lots of that plus 2 lots of normal salt, and the chips were
salty.
A tad salty.
Nice.
And on that note,
so just to sum up, Don Butler, well done. Looking forward to you taking Keir Starmer's job, because he's crap and doesn't deserve it.
Yes.
In a nutshell.
And if Scottish Labour could speak up about Don Butler in general, that would be handy.
Well, thanks everybody. That's us for another week. Deborah, Brian, thanks for joining me. Can I ask everybody, if you're enjoying this podcast, please go and give it a 5-star rating, and whatever app you use to access us, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or many other ones. You can find us at leftungag.org. We've got a new article went up today, I believe, from Val Wardren. If you can find us on Twitter at _ungagged. We're also available on Facebook. So go, like, share the podcast, tell your friends about it, and we'll hear from you next week. Say bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.